Hello and welcome to Arise News. You're watching the Global Business Report. I'm Rosa Sodiri, coming to you from Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos. And we're going to cross live to Washington, D.C., where U.S. President Joe Biden is making remarks on Russia and Ukraine and possibly new sanctions.
Which is a different war than in other places because both topographically it's different. It's flat, it's not in the mountains, and it requires different kinds of weapons to be more effective. Today, I'm announcing another $800 million to further augment Ukraine's ability to fight in the east, in the Donbas region. This package includes heavy artillery weapons, dozens of howitzers, and 144,000 rounds of ammunition to go with those howitzers. It also includes more tactical drones. In the past 2 months, we've moved weapons and equipment to Ukraine at record speed. We've sent thousands of anti-armor and anti-missile helicopters, drones, grenade launchers, machine guns, rifles, radar systems. More than 50 million rounds of ammunition had already been sent. The United States alone has provided 10 anti-armor systems for every one Russian tank that's in Ukraine, a 10-to-1 ratio. We're sharing and will continue to share significant timely intelligence with Ukraine to help defend them against Russian aggression. And on top of this, these direct contributions from the United States, we're the outfit facilitating the significant flow of weapons and systems to Ukraine from other allies and partners around the world, like the S-300 long-range anti-aircraft systems that Slovakia recently transferred to Ukraine. We are getting them in there. We won't always be able to advertise everything that our partners are doing to support Ukraine and its fight for freedom, but to modernize Teddy Roosevelt's famous advice, sometimes we will speak softly and carry a large javelin, because we're sending a lot of those in as well. But we're not sitting on the funding that Congress has provided for Ukraine. We're sending it directly to the front lines of freedom, to the fearless and skilled Ukrainian fighters who are standing in the breach. You got to admit, must be amazed at the courage of this country, the resolve that they're showing, not just their military, but the average citizen, men and women, young men, young women as well. It's, the sustained and coordinated support of the international community, led and facilitated by the United States, is a significant reason why Ukraine is able to stop Russia from taking over their country thus far. Every American taxpayer, every member of our armed forces can be proud of the fact that our country's generosity and the skill and service of our military helped arm and repel Russia's aggression in Ukraine, to beat back Putin's savagery that tried to seize Ukraine's capital and wipe out Ukraine's government. The Battle of Kyiv was a historic victory for the Ukrainians. It was a victory for freedom, won by the Ukrainian people with unprecedented assistance by the United States and our allies and our partners. Now we have to accelerate that assistance package to help prepare Ukraine for Russia's offensive that's going to be more limited in terms of geography, but not in terms of brutality. Not in terms of brutality. Combined with our recent drawdowns, it will ensure a steady flow of weapons and equipment into Ukraine over the next few weeks. However, with this latest disbursement, I've almost exhausted the drawdown authority I have that Congress authorized for Ukraine in a bipartisan spending bill last month. In order to sustain Ukraine for the duration of this fight, next week I'm going to have to be sending to Congress a supplemental budget request to keep weapons and ammunition flowing without interruption to the brave Ukrainian fighters and continue to deliver economic assistance to the Ukrainian people. My hope is, and my expectation is, Congress would move and act quickly. And I want to thank the Congress, Democrats and Republicans, for their support for the people of Ukraine. Our unity at home, our unity with our allies and partners, and our unity with the Ukrainian people is sending an unmistakable message to Putin. He will never succeed in dominating and occupying all of Ukraine. That will not happen. In addition to bolstering Ukraine's resistance on the battlefield, we're also demonstrating our support for the people of Ukraine. Today, the United States is announcing that we intend to provide an additional $500 million in direct economic assistance to the Ukrainian government. This brings our total economic support for Ukraine to $1 billion in the past 2 months. This is money the government can help use to stabilize their economy, to support communities that have been devastated by the Russian onslaught, and pay the brave workers that continue to provide essential services to the people of Ukraine. You know, these past weeks have seen a terrible human cost of Putin's ambition for conquest and control. Approximately two-thirds of all Ukrainian children have been displaced from their home. More than 5 million Ukrainians have fled their country. It's an absolute outrage. The idea this is happening, approaching the second quarter of the 21st century, is just, Last month when I was in Europe, I announced that the United States would welcome 100,000 Ukrainians so that we share in the responsibility of supporting Ukrainians fleeing Putin's war machine. We've already welcomed tens of thousands of Ukrainians to the United States, and today I'm announcing a program, Unite for Ukraine, a new program to enable Ukrainians seeking refuge to come directly from Europe to the United States. This new humanitarian parole program will complement the existing legal pathways available to Ukrainians, including immigrant visas and refugee processing. It will provide an expedient channel for secure legal migration from Europe to the United States for Ukrainians who have a U.S. sponsor, such as a family or an NGO. This program will be fast, it will be streamlined, and will ensure the United States honors its commitment to go to the people of Ukraine and need not go through our southern border. We're also continuing to ratchet up the pressure on Putin and further isolate Russia on the world stage. Yesterday, the Treasury Department rolled out additional measures to crack down on the entities and individuals attempting to evade our unprecedented sanctions, not just ours, but throughout the West. Today, I'm announcing that the United States will ban Russian-affiliated ships from our ports, as they did in Europe. That means no ship that sails under the Russian flag or that is owned or operated by a Russian interest will be allowed to dock in a United States port or access our shores. None. This is yet another critical step we're taking in concert with our partners in the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, and further to deny Russia the benefits of international economic system that they so enjoyed in the past. We don't know how long this war will last, but as we approach the 2-month mark, here's what we do know. Putin has failed to achieve his grand ambitions on the battlefield. After weeks of shelling Kyiv, Kyiv still stands. President Zelensky and his democratically elected government still remain in power. And the Ukrainian armed forces, joined by many brave Ukrainian civilians, have thwarted Russia's conquest of their country. They've been bolstered from day one by an unstinting supply of weapons, ammunition, armor, intelligence from the nations of the free world, led by us, the United States. As Russia continues to grind out the military advances and their military advances and the brutalities against Ukraine, Putin is banking on us losing interest. That's been my view. You heard me say this from the beginning. He was counting on NATO, European Union, our allies in Asia, cracking, moving away. He's betting on Western unity will crack. He's still betting on that. And once again, we're going to prove him wrong. We will not lessen our resolve. We're going to continue to stand with the brave and proud people of Ukraine. We will never fail in our determination to defend freedom and oppose tyranny. It's as simple as that. So again, I want to thank the American people. Thank the American people for their support of the Ukrainian people. This is our responsibility, it seems to me, and we've been able to hold the whole world together in this effort. So thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to take just one or two questions. I got a plane to catch.
What does Putin claiming control over Mariupol mean? How significant is that?
Well, first of all, it's questionable whether he does control Mariupol. One thing for sure we know about Mariupol, he should allow humanitarian corridors to let people on that steel mill and other places that are buried under rubble to get out. That's what any head of state would do in such a circumstance. And so there is no evidence yet that Mariupol is completely fallen.
Mr. President, on Title 42, sir, are you considering delaying lifting Title 42?
No, what I'm considering is continuing to hear from well, first of all, there's going to be an appeal by the Justice Department. because as a matter of principle, we want to be able to be in a position where if in fact it is strongly concluded by the scientists that we need Title 42, that we be able to do that. But there has been no decision on extending Title 42. Thank you.
Mr. President, how long can the U.S. maintain the level and pace of this military support for Ukraine?
Well, we have the capacity to do this for a long time. The question is, are we going to continue to maintain the support of the international community and keep the pressure on Putin to prevent him from overrunning the country, number one, and number two, make sure we continue to maintain the economic sanctions, which over time, and we're beginning to see it, are devastating their economy and their ability to move forward. So the most important thing right now is maintain the unity. So far, so good. Thank you very much.
How much money are you going to ask for in the supplemental? How much money in the supplemental?
The answer that's being decided now. I have asking the Defense Department to put together a Thank you.
Thank you.
We just heard from U.S. President Joe Biden making a number of announcements with respect to economic aid and military assistance to Ukraine, $800 million for military equipment, $500 million for additional economic assistance. Also saying that a number of ships, any ship has been banned if they're being run by Russia at U.S. ports. So for more on what we just heard, we're going to cross over now to the United States to speak with U.S. Correspondent Eric Ham. Eric, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, what do you make of what we just heard from President Joe Biden?
Well, you're right. The president just announced another tranche of aid to Ukraine. But also, I think what was important about what the president has said is he has exhausted all of the military spending provided by Congress. That $3.5 billion in aid is now gone. Now the president is saying that he will be sending a supplemental bill to Congress next week to provide additional funding. Now, this comes after we know President Biden this week spoke to world leaders, including the UK Prime Minister, the heads of the European Union, NATO, and other Western allies. In addition to that, we know yesterday President Biden met with his military leadership, the Joint Chiefs, as well as the Secretary of Defense. Now we see that the United States is becoming more aggressive in sending resources to Ukraine. And now we will see what the response will be from Congress when next week they return from their Easter recess. And it will now be up to them to determine how much more in aid the president will be allowed to actually send to Ukraine. In addition to that, we cannot, I think, underscore how not only the president has been sending aid directly, but now they've opened up this new channel of assistance to Ukraine directly from U.S. military contractors. So we know that there has been resources that have gone directly from the Pentagon to Ukraine. Now we know this new level of funding and resource aid is going directly from U.S. military contractors. So clearly what we're seeing here is a United States and a White House that is being far more aggressive and stepping up its efforts to try to help Ukraine combat this invasion by Russia.
Thanks, Eric. So putting aside, partisan politics in Congress, there is universal support for the continued funding of Ukraine. How do you think the request for the supplementary budget to keep the money flowing, how do you think that's going to be received by Congress when they get back from recess?
Frankly, we do not know. Now, we do know that Congress up until now has been very supportive. We remember, of course, that nearly $14 billion that they passed for aid. And also, we have been hearing more from Republicans saying that the White House needs to do more. So perhaps we will begin to see more from Congress when they return next week. Already, there have been some members of the president's own party even who have been calling for U.S. forces on the ground in Ukraine, something that we had not heard until recently. And so now I think what we're going to see is a Congress that is becoming increasingly more aggressive, not less so, because even now we have seen a Congress that has been willing to provide the resources. But now that we see that the president is requesting more, it's just unclear at this time because, again, given the polarization, and now that we're just about less than 6 months away from the midterm elections, unfortunately, now everything becomes colored by politics.
And Eric, as far as that request by some in Biden's party to actually put boots on the ground, isn't that the red line that won't be crossed? Because NATO and the Europeans, they're a little nervous about, aggressively moving forward with any kind of military action. So, how do you think Biden would react to that? I mean, that's a no-go area, isn't it?
Well, already we know it was Senator Chris Coons from Delaware, who was a very, very close ally of the president's. Remember, Delaware is the president's hometown. And it was this senator, Democratic senator, who actually called for these resources to be actually sent who called for U.S. forces on the ground. He was not saying they should be on the ground to help with the actual invasion, but they should be there in logistical and support. But again, the White House actually shot that down, saying that was, in fact, a no-go, that they were not prepared to send boots on the ground. But even as that may happen, and even though we know the president has made clear that there still will not be U.S. forces on the ground, there is growing cause for when the United States will have a U.S. presence in Ukraine. Remember, there are some countries who've already sent back some of their diplomatic presence to the capital city of Kiev. The United States is still working out of Poland. And right now, they're wondering if and when the president will begin, or the State Department will step up its diplomatic efforts on the ground, and when we will see the president or some high-level U.S. officials actually on the ground in Ukraine. This is something that, of course, we know we saw time and time again in Iraq and Afghanistan. But right now, the White House has said if, in fact, the president or other high-level officials were to travel to Ukraine, they would not announce it beforehand.
Eric, earlier, President Putin made a claim that Mariupol has fallen and is under the control of Russian forces. President Biden was asked about that at the end of his address. He pushed back, saying that there's no data to support it. Are you hearing anything about the situation in Mariupol and whether or not it has fallen?
Well, actually, from what our sources have told us, and we've spoken both with the White House and the Pentagon earlier today, and we are told that Mariupol right now is still under the control of Ukraine. And so right now we are getting conflicting reports. We have heard from the Kremlin that they now control Mariupol, but right now, from what we are being told, that is the city is still in the hands of Ukraine.
All right, finally, Eric, President Biden announced another raft of sanctions. He banned, essentially, the U.S. is banning all Russian ships from U.S. ports. Look, sanctions after sanctions, is there any sign that any of this is working, Eric?
Well, right now, we do know that Russia's economy is in tatters right now. Already there has been a default, we know. But again, I think where it really begins to hurt if and when Europe will decide to go after those key oil and energy resources of Russia. And I think until we see that, I think right now Russia still is afforded the ability to be able to finance this war because they're still getting $1 billion per day to finance this war from the money they bring in from oil and energy supplies that they ship to Europe. But even with that, we're still seeing that this is becoming problematic. In fact, we've heard from a number of Russian oligarchs who have actually lashed out, saying that this war needs to end because, of course, it's causing problems for many of them. But still, at this point, there does not seem to be at least a time where Russia is unwilling to actually stop this invasion in Ukraine.
All right, U.S. Correspondent Eric Ham. Eric, thank you so much for bringing us up to date on the latest happenings around the war in Ukraine and the U.S. response. So thank you so much for your insights.